Hello, my name's Penny Taylor and I run the Moving into Engineering Management course for the Institution of Structural Engineers. One of the key elements of that course is having difficult conversations, and today I'd like to talk to you about how to have difficult conversations but in the virtual world. One of the most difficult tasks for managers is to have a serious sit-down talk with a direct report. If you've got to deal with people over poor attendance, poor performance, or perhaps poor professional judgment, it's often a difficult moment, but sitting down in person at least gives it the gravitas and sense of dignity that the situation demands. What happens, however, when we can't sit down together? So the new world, post-COVID-19, where we're all having to get used to remote working, and both managers and employees are learning to navigate these new challenges. A major challenge involves our affinity for direct communication. And for some people, if they can't handle the situation by text or email, then they ignore it and fail to address it at all. For those of us who have management responsibilities, that is just not realistic. We must have tough conversations, even if it's uncomfortable and made more awkward by distance. So I'd like to take a few minutes to talk to you about the strategies for making difficult conversations successful in the virtual world. There are 4 things you should be doing to have difficult conversations in the normal world. First of all, make sure that it's an opportunity for two-way communication, so that you're asking questions, you're hearing the other person's point of view. It's not just tell. Make sure that you've done your preparation, you've got your facts straight, you've prepared any paperwork that you may need. Consider the place and time. Normally, this would be during the working day, booking a meeting room or a private office. But when people are working remotely and perhaps working flexibly, with flexible hours, flexible time, you need to consider what time works best for them. You need to consider their facilities at home. Do they perhaps only have a private office to work in when the children have gone to bed, so that it might be better to have difficult conversations of an evening? You need to think about the right thing for them. And number 4, agree and document the outcomes from any meeting, so that you make sure that both of you are on the same page and you know what you're committing to do and when you're committing to do it by. So 3 things to think about to make this work in the virtual world. And up until 1876, when the telephone was invented, humans had only ever done face-to-face communication. So in the space of 150 years, the technology has moved on hugely to the point where we're now doing video meetings nearly all the time. And yet the way humans interact has not really kept pace with that. We still read a lot of information through body language, through facial expression, through tone of voice. So it's really important that if you're going to have a difficult conversation with somebody, you're much more likely to be successful doing it on a video meeting than you are just on a telephone conference. So the first thing to think about is the context. How you increase transparency and communication with your person. You also need to think about empathy using your active listening skills. And thirdly, you need to think about ownership and the I messages that you give. So I'm going to look at each one of these 3 in a little more detail now. Context. Over-communicate. If you think about the days when everybody was in the office, a lot of information would have been picked up through overhearing other conversations, through chit-chat in the coffee room, through reading notices on the notice board. None of that peripheral information is available to people in the virtual world. So it's really important for you as a manager to make sure that you're giving them the information they need to do their job successfully. So over-communicate data, figures, financials, org charts, anything of that nature needs to be communicated and communicated again. Build trust. give them the information, the bigger picture information that they need to be successful in the jobs you're asking them to do. And clearly define your expectations. Make sure that you are really clear, ideally using SMART goals, so that they know exactly what is expected of them and what the success criteria will be. Empathy. Use your active listening skills. So this is not just listening, but looking as if you are listening. And particularly in the virtual world, it's very easy to get sidetracked by other things that are happening on your computer screen. If you're having a difficult conversation with one of your members of staff, that needs to be the focus of your attention. Don't try and answer emails or send text messages in the chat box. If this difficult conversation is important, then it's important enough to have 100% of your attention and 100% of their attention as well. Notice the emotion. When they talk to you, if they use words like anger, frustration, use those words back to them. Make sure that you let them know you have heard what they're trying to tell you. And don't make it about you. If they start to tell you about the problems they're having, it's not an escalation game where you then start to say about they know nothing, the problems you're having are far worse. This conversation is entirely about them. Ownership. I want you to talk to them using I messages. And these days that is quite difficult sometimes because we're so used to talking about we, the team. But when you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, it makes it much more powerful if you speak from the heart, from your point of view. And that means starting a sentence with I. I have this issue. I have this problem with your performance. I am disappointed in the outcomes. It needs to be I. It's much more powerful. Remember your integrity. You need to be open and honest with somebody. If their performance doesn't meet expectations, you need to tell them that, and you need to tell them that quickly rather than letting them spend a long time thinking they're doing okay. And hold yourself accountable. If a difficult conversation needs to be had, it's your job to prompt that conversation. It's your job to have it, to give that member of staff the opportunity to increase their performance and to do their job to the right standard. So in summary, there are 3 new habits for you to practice. That is, make sure you set the context, increase the transparency and communication that you have with your team. Remember your empathy, particularly your active listening skills. And think about the ownership of the message, the I messages that we're not keen on having but need to with difficult conversations. And hopefully, if you practice those 3 things, you will become the super manager that I know you have the potential to be. In the meantime, if you would like to know more about further courses or the Moving into Engineering Management course, I will be running the course in an online virtual form on the 5th and 6th of October this year. Or we're hoping to have the first face-to-face deliveries back next year from the 1st and 2nd of March. If you would like any further information or have any comments, you have my email address and I'd be delighted to hear from you.